For the nearly 100 years that professional women's basketball has existed, we've seen some insane moments. Moments that were pretty amazing, moments that would make you cringe, and moments that just don't make sense. Like in the case of Kalia Copper, where in the middle of an NBA game, she literally lost her wig and a fan was ejected for laughing too hard. And somehow, moments like these aren't rare, because we've had people actively trolling professional games, an entire league threatened to erase a franchise because a team got on a private flight, and players getting into fights so bad that it literally caused season-ending injuries. No matter what the level of women's basketball is, there have always been unbelievable, bizarre, and crazy moments to see. However, which one of these moments is the craziest moment of all time? Well, one in contention is when WNBA superstar Liz Cambage had a legendary crash out during the Tokyo Olympics. In July 2021, Liz Cambage abruptly withdrew from the Australia women's national basketball team just days before the Tokyo Olympics. At the time, Cambage cited mental health concerns, pointing to the stress and isolation of the Olympic bubble. But then the real reason why she left began to surface. Behind the scenes, Australia had played a scrimmage against the Nigerian women's national basketball team, and according to multiple reports, the game spiraled out of control. The scrimmage was reportedly extremely physical, with Cambage involved in multiple altercations, including elbowing one Nigerian player in the head, slapping another, and a Nigerian player ended up rushing and punching Cambage so hard that she fell to the ground. The whole incident was already pretty crazy, but the cherry on top was when Cambage started to verbally attack the Nigerian players. Several Nigerian players alleged that during the chaos, Cambage started spewing racial slurs at them, calling them monkeys or telling them, quote, "go back to your third world country," which was pretty crazy considering that Cambage herself was half Nigerian. Cambage, in response to all this, denied the allegations of racism, and after a bit of time, things seemed to move on. But in 2023, Cambage decided to reignite the drama. In an interview with Taylor Rooks, Cambage reiterated that she had never said anything racist to the Nigerian team and claimed that she was the one that had actually been wrong. On top of this, Cambage even stated that she was now seeking to switch national teams to play for Nigeria instead. In Cambage's words, she had been in cahoots with Nigerian basketball officials for years and that she was looking forward to representing the team. However, Cambage's claims did not go over well as various Nigerian players swiftly and publicly denied Cambage's claims, with one Nigerian player, Promise Amukamura, stating that Cambage was never in talks with the Nigerian Federation and the only person she had been communicating with was a former Nigerian coach who had already been fired. To this day, Cambage has never joined the Nigerian team, and there has been no further comments on whether she will actually play for the team in the future. And somehow, this wasn't Cambage's only big issue, as she was also embroiled in massive drama during her last years in the WNBA.
Star center Liz Cambage reportedly quit the team, resulting in a contract divorce between the center and the Sparks, which occurred with just 9 games left in the season.
In 2022, Liz Cambage finally signed with what she called her dream team, the Los Angeles Sparks. But within weeks, that dream turned into a car crash. From the moment that she landed in LA, Cambage clashed with almost everyone, arguing with teammates, snapping at coaches, and even getting into a dispute over her jersey number. Cambage was even known for calling out teammates during film sessions for not passing her the ball enough. However, everything exploded on July 23, 2022, when the Sparks faced Cambage's former team, the Las Vegas Aces. During the game, Cambage complained so much about not getting touches, her teammates started to ignore drawn-up plays just to get Cambage the ball. However, this ended up not working out as the Sparks were blown out 84-66. After the loss, Cambage was so fed up with everything that she said, quote, "I can't do this anymore, best of luck to you guys," and left the locker room. And this actually ended up being Cambage's last time in a Sparks uniform, as days later, the Sparks and Cambage agreed to a contract divorce, terminating her contract. And since then, Cambage hasn't played a single minute in the WNBA, only playing in overseas leagues. However, as insane as Cambage is, she was probably better off not playing in the WNBA. And that's because it's probably the only big pro league that fined a team for providing their players better amenities.
The New York Liberty, they were fined for chartering flights to road games during the first half of the 2021 WNBA season.
In the second half of the 2021 WNBA season, New York Liberty owners Joe and Clara Tsai started to quietly charter private flights for their players. While this would be normal for WNBA players today, at the time, chartering flights for players was literally against the rules. So when league higher-ups learned that the Tsais were secretly chartering flights, they lost their minds. From the get-go, they slammed a $1 million fine on the Liberty, and the league's general counsel proposed even bigger penalties to issue. These included suspending the Tsai's ownership of the team, stripping the Liberty of a huge amount of draft picks, and for some reason, even terminating the franchise altogether. But in the end, cooler heads prevailed, and the league settled on a reduced fine of $500,000. However, this entire incident did not sit well with league players, with even stars like Sabrina Ionescu publicly calling the entire situation a joke. And this kind of made sense because for the league to potentially delete an entire franchise over providing better flights is pretty insane. Especially considering that a few years ago, in 2018, travel issues literally made a WNBA team forfeit a game. In 2018, the Las Vegas Aces, while trying to get a flight to their game against the Washington Mystics, experienced a travel nightmare that lasted over 26 hours. At one point, the Aces' flight to Washington was delayed again, rerouted, cancelled, and finally, when the team was actually able to get on their final flight, there was no single plane that had enough open seats, so the players were forced to split into 3 different flights. All of this ended up with the Aces landing just 4 hours before tip-off, and with zero sleep, cramped bodies, and pure exhaustion, the players and coaches made a call to forfeit the game. This decision was unprecedented because it was incredibly rare for any pro sports team to outright forfeit a game, and the Aces' decision caused many divisive opinions. Some fans completely backed the players, roasting the league for claiming to be the premier women's basketball league, yet making players take cheap flights. While others clowned the players, saying they were paid to play a sport and should have just toughed it out. However, the Aces' travel nightmare wasn't even close to the craziest thing that happened in women's basketball. Because while dealing with bad travel conditions is one thing, dealing with dildos being thrown at you is on another scale entirely.
No room for any of that type of activity.
Yeah, and no one's picked the object up yet. You guys, oh my gosh, okay.
The WNBA has dealt with all kinds of trolls for most of its history, some harmless and some genuinely unhinged, but none of them were as bizarre when for a stretch of games, some fans started to chuck literal sex toys onto the court. This all started on July 29, 2025, during a matchup between the Atlanta Dream and the Golden State Valkyries. Late in the fourth quarter, a green sex toy suddenly landed near the players. At first, everyone treated it like a bizarre one-off prank, with refs looking confused, the broadcast booth struggling to even describe what had happened, and players laughing it off. However, this incident happened again and again, and by the end of a few weeks, the league had recorded 6 separate incidents of sex toys being thrown during live play. Players and officials were not amused, with Indiana Fever guard Sophie Cunningham publicly telling fans to quote, "stop throwing dildos on the court." But days later, someone threw one directly at her. At this point, security was ramped up and several individuals were even arrested and charged, with one of the worst incidents involving a toy allegedly striking a 12-year-old girl in the crowd. But why was this even happening? Well, there were 2 reasons. The first and most likely reason, which was confirmed by some of the arrested perpetrators, was that these people simply wanted clout and did it to go viral. The second reason was for a bizarre crypto scheme where a group promoting a meme-based cryptocurrency claimed that they were orchestrating the trend as a way to combat a toxic environment in the crypto world. Regardless, at the end of this, the league cracked down, security tightened, and the streak of dildo throwing games ended with no one trying again since. However, as crazy as these incidents were, it doesn't compare to the biggest brawl in WNBA history.
Detroit has one timeout left. Here we go. Okay, this is absolutely inexcusable.
In July 2008, a WNBA matchup between the Detroit Shock and the Los Angeles Sparks turned into one of the wildest brawls in women's basketball history. With just 4.5 seconds left in the game, Sparks rookie Candace Parker got tangled up with Detroit forward Lynette Pearson while boxing out for a rebound. Both players hit the floor and the situation exploded. After the initial fall, Pearson literally stepped over Parker and they fell over each other and the benches cleared. In the middle of the chaos, Detroit assistant coach Brittney tried to separate the players, but in the insanity, he ended up shoving Sparks legend Lisa Leslie, knocking her to the ground. Because of this, LA's Delisha Milton-Jones ran in and smacked Mahorn from behind, escalating things even further. However, this wasn't even the craziest moment, as Detroit's Cheryl Ford, who was trying to calm things down, literally tore her ACL while trying to restrain her teammate. After the dust settled, the WNBA dropped heavy discipline, suspending 11 people, with Parker, Pearson, and several others receiving multi-game bans. Detroit was hit so hard by suspensions, plus Ford's season-ending injury, that they had to sign a 50-year-old Hall of Famer just to meet the league's minimum roster requirements. However, while this brawl was definitely one of the craziest moments in women's basketball history, it doesn't even compare to when this superstar was used as a wartime international bargaining chip.
WNBA star Brittney Griner is being detained in Moscow as tensions ratchet up between Russia and the U.S. over the invasion of Ukraine.
Brittney Griner is one of the most dominant centers in the history of women's basketball. But when she was arrested in Russia in 2022, none of her accolades or status mattered. Like many WNBA players, Griner spent her offseason playing overseas to supplement her income. Because of this, on February 17, 2022, she was on her way back to her overseas team in Russia, but she was detained at an airport near Moscow. This was because Russian authorities reported finding vape cartridges containing cannabis oil in her luggage, and cannabis was very illegal in Russia. Under Russian law, Griner was charged with drug possession and smuggling, and although she maintained that the cartridges were accidentally packed and not intended for use in Russia, she ultimately had to plead guilty, especially in the face of a legal system where she barely knew the language. And Griner was shown no mercy, as on August 4, 2022, she was sentenced to 9 years in a Russian penal colony, a punishment that many viewed as wildly over the top. And the likely reason for this disproportionate punishment was because of the timing of Griner's arrest. 1 week after Griner had been arrested, Russia had invaded Ukraine, massively increasing US-Russian tensions. Because of all this, US officials and analysts suggested Griner was being used as leverage in a political standoff. And for months, the US and Russia engaged in negotiation over Griner's situation, with Griner dealing with harsh conditions the entire time. During her roughly 10 months in prison, Griner reported having to deal with dehumanizing conditions, including being forced to spend hours a day making uniforms for Russian soldiers, and being forced to spend hours outside during a literal blizzard. Eventually, on December 8, 2022, the US government were able to negotiate a prisoner exchange, securing Griner's release in return for Victor Bout, a convicted Russian arms trafficker. Griner was able to return home, underwent recovery and reintegration, and was eventually able to return to her normal life. For a WNBA superstar to be basically taken hostage, live as a prisoner for 10 months, and be used as a political bargaining chip is most likely the craziest women's basketball moment that will ever happen.